Mila unexpectedly becomes the Queen Luna of the wolf pack after a life-and-death struggle, but her victory seems to be just the beginning of a larger conspiracy. How will her relationship with Roman develop? Can she truly control the wolf pack and uncover the truth hidden behind it? Explore the secrets of the wolf moon. Subscribe to join the adventure. Chapter 16. I scarfed down the food on the plate before me with vigor, pausing only to drink from the glass nearby before continuing my feast. Cynthia sat across from me patiently, quietly watching me as I devoured the meal prepared for me. We were seated on the stage within the abandoned temple yet again. Caleb had me on lockdown at this point. After finding out the situation during the hunt, both Logan and I were on his bad side. I was officially no longer guest status, nearly kept as a prisoner at this point. If it weren't for Diana, I'm pretty sure Caleb would have left me in a dungeon cell until Roman came back. As for Logan, I knew he was being punished, though I didn't know how. I also knew his punishment had nothing to do with killing a pack member. I had almost been hurt during a pack hunt. It was two broken rules at once. I felt guilt for several reasons. If I hadn't gone on the hunt, it wouldn't have created an opening for a wolf to try to hurt me, so Vio would still be alive. Logan wouldn't have been punished, halting any training I had planned with him. And Caleb would not be waiting for his alpha to come back and delegate a punishment suitable for his beta for not being as alert as he could be around me. However, guilt wasn't strong enough of a feeling to outweigh the need for freedom. So it was with great stealth and difficulty that I was able to finally sneak out for a moment of freedom. The temple was like a safe haven to me, a place none would go to if they were hunting me. By the time I was able to finally sneak out and hide away there, Cynthia was waiting with a meal already made, as though she had been told ahead of time. I'd already begun to accept that she was a creature beyond my ability to understand. He's been gone for ages, I finally spoke first, skipping all the formalities of pretenses that everything was okay. How am I supposed to stop him from killing all of humanity if he isn't even here? My frustration became renewed when voicing my own question, but Cynthia didn't seem fazed by my concerns. Have faith, Cynthia said wisely. I put down my fork firmly, gripping the edge of the table and sitting up straight to peer at her with indignation. Her dark sable eyes only watched me with that deep knowledge, calm as the lake under the moonlight. In what, exactly? I finally muttered before looking away grumpily. In yourself. In the King Alpha. And in the moon goddesses. Cynthia suggested one after the other, as though she had an entire list beyond that of the three listed, and I were the one being unreasonable. I still don't understand any of this. How can I shift, even a little bit? Did my entire village lie to me? Am I really some outcast wolf? I just don't understand, I sighed in exasperation, leaning forward to rest my head on my hand. Your village didn't lie to you. Your mother is your mother and your father is your father, Cynthia confirmed carefully, that familiar tone of voice creeping in. I just knew that she knew more than she was willing to say, always picking and choosing what information to divulge at any given time. Or perhaps she's an all-seeing witch who has had this conversation, and all future conversations with me in her visions already. But still, her statement brought me a form of relief. I wasn't crazy. I still belonged to the family I yearned to see again. And they would welcome me back as their own. As long as they didn't know the creature I had begun to turn into. I frowned at nothing in particular. The wolves are going extinct. And yet Logan didn't hesitate to kill one of his own. And me. I killed one, too. I know it was to save my own life, but it feels like. I hesitated, unsure of what exactly the emotion I was feeling was entirely. A great sin. A great shame. All life lost is a shame, but we all must rest in the crone's bosom at some point, Cynthia responded softly, reaching forward to touch my free hand in comfort. Except Roman, I whispered, my frown deepening. He will be coming back sooner than you think, Cynthia finally admitted, making me straighten in immediate alertness. She kept her grip on my hand softly, but there was something in her face that held a hint of concern. He will bring before you an obstacle, and you will have to make another hard choice. I do not know what the outcome will be, but it will be either life or death. I groaned loudly. Not one of those. Do you know how many times I've almost died in this year alone? I stood reluctantly, preparing to sneak back into my prison before Caleb would notice. Good luck, Mila, Cynthia called to me as I left. I walked behind the young wolf, Deb, while dropping seeds into the small pits she'd made in the farming ground. Caleb stood not too far in the distance, speaking to another wolf about the farming, crop, and harvest plans. He must have been in a decent mood to allow me to walk even a couple of steps away from him, but more than likely he didn't see anything dangerous in allowing me to help with planting future crop with some of the pack members. So, you are the King Alpha's mate, aren't you? Deb asked me in a hushed voice, glancing towards Caleb, as though she knew it was a topic we weren't supposed to speak of. Technically, I responded shortly, I guess. Then are you preparing to become Queen Luna? She asked, reminding me of Diana's hopeful tone, as she'd expected the same result. We haven't ever had a Luna before. I'm not sure about that. I began hesitantly. There's been rumors, Deb answered, as though that was the only thing that needed to be said to accept my fate. I waited for her to continue, but she seemed content in that explanation entirely. What rumors? I finally pressed with frustration. Rumors that could get you a death sentence from the King Alpha, Deb said gravely before smirking, well, if you weren't his mate and in line for Queen Luna. What rumors? I repeated with more exasperation. They are saying you can half shift as easy as breathing. Oh, now that's just I tried to butt in, but Deb continued without interruption. They are saying you hunt with the pack. And you train with the warrior wolves. That your union with the King Alpha is so blessed by the moon goddesses, that you will bring back the last blessing and save our kind once you're Queen Luna. Deb spoke almost without take a single breath between any of her words, an excitement lighting in her features. I had stopped following her, staring with surprise. The last blessing. The mother's blessing came back when you and the King Alpha completed the mating mark. I've heard that the maiden's blessing may come back if you and the Alpha. You know. Deb smiled then, giggling like a small girl at the words she didn't say. I dropped everything in my hands altogether, opening my mouth in stunned surprise and then complete embarrassment. Absolutely not. I declared loudly before crossing my arms over my chest almost defensively. I'm not some mare to be bred for everyone's benefit. Deb laughed then loudly, bending over to pick up the basket of seeds I'd spilled. I paused, but then bent down to help clean up my own mess as well. Do they really believe the maiden's blessing will come back because of me? I mean, if I become that ridiculous title. Luna. Whatever, I became flustered at the thought, but pushed on further, the pack isn't entirely against it. Well, some are against it, of course. Because you're from the human village. They don't understand why the moon goddesses have picked a human to bless above the lichens. But many of us still hold faith in them, even if they had forsaken us. And those who lost faith are getting it back because of you. Deb stood and held the basket out to me easily. I hesitated, but took it from her, mulling over her words. It's also very entertaining watching the King Alpha get so worked up over you. I think you would make a good Luna. You could bring our pack great fortune. Or great disaster, I thought solemnly. Before I could press Deb further, there seemed to be a sudden change in the atmosphere. The wolves who were helping with planting crops along the soil all stood together, looking towards the village with a tension that I hadn't quite developed. Deb lifted her hand over her brow, squinting through the sunlight. I turned to look as well, but they were seeing something beyond sight. Mila, Caleb called out to me sharply. I looked to him to see him waving me towards him. I turned to Deb and handed her the basket with a sigh. "I've been summoned," I said dramatically. "We all have," Deb replied simply. I frowned, but Caleb called out my name again with more impatience. I waved to Deb shortly and began to stalk to the impatient wolf with my own irritation. The wolves in the field followed, gathering their supplies and beginning to pack up as though they had somewhere to be. I looked around me with confusion for a moment before approaching Caleb with furrowed brows. "What's going on?" I asked him. "You can't feel it?" Caleb asked me, curious all of the sudden. "Feel what exactly?" "When you're mates, you should be able to feel each other's presence. It makes it easier to track each other in case of dangerous situations," Caleb said slowly before pausing. "Where's the king alpha right now?" I opened my mouth, but then halted my smart reply, looking inward. I had tried to experiment with that bond between Roman and me, but even now as I inspected it, it was closed tight. Roman didn't want me to feel him, so I couldn't. "He's blocking me," I finally admitted to Caleb. Caleb sighed, running a hand through his hair anxiously. "That sounds like him. The King Alpha is here now. He's just returned. And he's summoned the pack to the arena for an announcement. After that, I'm sure he'll want a complete report on your activities while he's been gone. I can't wait to see what's in store for me." The sarcasm was strong in his last statement, but any guilt I felt was halted by the fact that Roman was back. I recalled Cynthia's prediction that Roman would come back soon and bring an obstacle of life or death before me. I felt immediate dread, my hand impulsively going to the blade at my hip. Caleb saw the reaction and frowned. "I wouldn't worry too much, Mila. I'm only mostly joking," he tried to comfort me suddenly. I narrowed my eyes. "I'm not worried," I scoffed, stomping off towards the arena with renewed determination. "Oh right, I forgot you're the fearless human not human wolf not wolf girl not girl," Caleb replied, following close behind me. I shot him a look of daggers at his little joke, but he only smirked in response. I hadn't been in the arena since my sparring matches with Logan, which had been a few weeks at this point. When I entered, my eyes immediately scanned the crowd of wolves that had begun to form around the arena for any sign of him. I found him standing to the side of one of the weapons displays, his arms folded and his face stony, as he watched the crowd as well. I couldn't see any signs of punishment, but then the situation had happened long enough ago that I felt any injuries would have been healed by now. I watched him only a moment longer before giving up hope that he would ever look in my direction again. Instead, I scanned the crowd further to find Diana, who waved excitedly. I tried to walk towards her, but Caleb halted me, holding me next to him instead. I glared at him, but he only bumped my arm with his elbow teasingly. My eyes caught several other wolves I had begun to get to know over time, smiles greeting me, and eventually I found Kate, whose eyes were already on me solidly. I blinked in surprise, but then lifted my hand in a quiet greeting. Kate nodded, but didn't look away, as though there was something she wanted to say but couldn't. The arena was cleared in the center, much how it had been when I had to complete the challenge against Roman when I'd first arrived here. Weapons were displayed in random carts on the edge of the arena, and my eyes automatically noted bows and blades by habit. The crowd parted and he was there, walking into the center of the arena. I hadn't seen Roman in nearly 3 months, but it wasn't as though I had truly forgotten his appearance. However, seeing him now, it was as though I was seeing him for the first time in years. A beast seemed to stretch out under my flesh at the sight of him, delight thrilling through me mindlessly. I pushed the urge to approach him, as my beast knew he was my mate and that made him mine, but I wasn't a beast. Instead, I only held my breath, watching his commanding form take center stage among his pack. "I'm glad to see you all well," Roman finally greeted his pack, his voice thunderous and alluring. I tightened my hand into fists anxiously. "I've visited our brother packs and it is as we expected. The mother's blessing has come back for all wolves. There was a rustle of hushed voices, exclamations, surprise, and excitement at the announcement, but Roman lifted his hand and they were quieted. This doesn't change our new laws or our pending fate. The maiden's blessing has still been refused. We will proceed as we planned, Roman continued, and anger slipping into his tone at the statement. My attention amplified at his statement about a plan, curious as to what exactly he meant by it, but this would be forgotten soon because Roman then cleared his throat and continued. To show my devotion to our laws, I have agreed to terms with our brother Pax. In regards to our Queen Luna. The arena was dead silent at this point, no shuffles of confusion or curiosity, just pure attention. I watched as an unfamiliar figure stepped into the arena, approaching Roman with confidence in each powerful stride. The woman stopped next to Roman, looking around to peer at the pack around her carefully. She was older than me, though I couldn't be sure just how much older. She was taller as well, her limbs holding clear power in them. Her hair was a strawberry blonde in braids that fell on her shoulders softly. And her sharp blue eyes were staring into the eyes of each wolf with superiority. They said, I am queen. I have judged several she-wolves based on ability, skill, qualifications, and power. I have accepted Lillian as my Queen Luna, Roman announced firmly. My world warped around me at the statement, watching as this woman reached for Roman's arm, touching it to suggest familiarity. My hope is that you all will accept her as well, but if not, well, that's why we are here. My eyes didn't leave Lillian, this new Queen Luna, before the pack. Even when Roman stepped to the side, leaving Lillian there to greet the pack, my eyes didn't follow him. I felt strange. Quiet even. It was as if every part of my mind, all questions, anxieties, fears, or anger had slipped away into silence. I didn't know anything about this woman. She hadn't done anything to me specifically. In fact, I wasn't sure she even knew about me at all, but still. I couldn't take my eyes off of her form with that silence swamping my thoughts. I am from the Red Moon Pack. I am the daughter of the Red Moon Alpha, so I know what will be expected of me. I'm excited to be joining this pack and I can't wait to get to know each of you, Lillian declared, her voice powerful despite the femininity. Eyes were on me as Lillian spoke. I could feel them, those wolves who knew I was the King Alpha's mate. They looked at each other, at me, and at Lillian. It was as though time had halted into this moment, when no one was sure what move to make next. And before Lillian could speak further, a loud screech of metal echoed around the arena. The wolves' eyes moved to the source, where Kate had stepped forward slowly, dragging the tip of her lance loudly along the concrete beside her. The threat she presented was clear despite her steely silence. I understand, Lillian said easily, changing her stance from one of ease into one in preparation for any attacks. The pack shuffled around the arena, and as if Kate had set off a spark of a flame, women began to step forward just as intimidatingly. The threat wasn't just to Lillian. It was to each other. The intent was clear. Just having the title Queen Luna wouldn't be enough. It was keeping it that would be the true task. And Lillian hadn't made a single Trinity Pack member submit as of yet. I remained where I stood, my eyes trained on Lillian with that dead silence still throughout me. My mind hadn't truly noted the gravity of the event that was going to unfold before me. The challengers were still stepping forward, preparing to fight one another, and then Lillian for the title of Queen Luna. And then they would have the King Alpha to themselves. I stepped forward. Caleb reached to stop me, probably by reflex, and a member next to him growled at him. I didn't know what response Caleb gave, because I was mindlessly stepping into the arena, with a determination that felt purely beast, more so than Milena. My eyes only moved from Lillian when I stepped past the female wolves who were preparing to enter the challenge. I turned my back on Lillian, staring down each female wolf from unknown to Kate, and let out an extremely uncharacteristic growl. Anyone who wants to get to her will have to get through me first, I snarled dangerously, a power flaring through me that reached towards the wolves before me savagely. The wolves stepped back almost immediately, their stances changing from ones of intimidation to that of fear and then respect. Kate was the only one who smiled, a pleased look satisfying her features before she silently stepped back into the crowd. The other wolves did as well, each one rescinding their challenge in my presence. I turned to face this new Queen Luna, making sure to pull my power back into me before she could get a taste of it. I wouldn't cheat. Not here. Not against her. Not for this title. This was purely between my own abilities and hers. What do you think you're doing? Roman asked from his position in front of the pack. I didn't take my eyes off of Lillian, my concern with Roman in the furthest depths in the back of my head. This was a matter of beasts, and my beast was positively fuming within me. Roman was mine. Even if he didn't want to be. Even if I didn't want him to be. He still was mine. I'm the King Alpha's mate, I declared, lifting my blade from my hip dangerously. I challenge you, Lillian of the Red Moon Pack. I challenge you right now. And when I win, I will be the Queen Luna. I then threw the blade to the side, not even throwing it a passing glance when it tumbled across the floor and under the feet of the pack. I didn't have to see Roman to feel his shock. The bond between us was suddenly open, as though his concentration had faltered with my statement. I let his presence wash over me, feeling that beast flex within me in a delighted response, but my focus was entirely on Lillian. I've heard about you, Lillian mused with entertainment. Aren't you no better than a human? I've heard you can't even shift. A laugh trickled from her throat as she straightened, no longer as tense as before when presented with a challenger. While she was caught off guard, I silently pulled at the power of my beast, focusing on my legs and feet only. Within a breath of a second, I lunged forward, moving faster than I'd ever been able to manage against Logan. I didn't care for her look of surprise. I only focused on the strength in my foot when I slammed it into her legs, twisting to grip her arm and shoulder before putting that unnatural strength into my arms and abdomen. Lillian was launched over my shoulder, thrown to the ground violently in the distance, just as Logan had taught me. Lillian rolled onto all fours quicker than I thought she would, launching herself towards me with a snarl in her throat. I twisted sharply, dodging her fist as it came for my face. I grabbed her arm, turning and using my own form as leverage before brutally twisting it until I heard a loud snap. Lillian yelped and then kicked me in the side hard enough to launch me across the arena. I rolled over the ground, the attack enough to cause a sharp pain of a no doubt broken ribs in response. I pushed myself to my hands and knees with a bit of difficulty, my breath sharp in my lungs, and looked to Lillian. She was snapping her arm back into place, a renewed anger fresh on her features at the attack. With her arm no doubt healing before me, she turned to face me again, holding her hands to her side dangerously. I stood with difficulty, my own injury not proceeding to heal as a wolf's does, and watched as her hands began to shift into that of claws. My heart thumped nervously in my chest, but I told myself to remain calm. I thought about my fights with Logan, focusing on his pointers, and took as deep of a breath as I could. Lillian knew I had strength unlike a human now, but she believed I couldn't shift. If I shifted now, with her, we would fight as one half shifted to another half shifted. Only, my injury hadn't healed like hers, so she would have the upper hand. I would have to try for underestimation. A potentially painful and risky strategy, act weaker and slower to lower her guard. She lunged for me and I dodged her once, twice, and then cried out when her claws caught my shoulder down to my clavicle. I stumbled, falling to a knee, and she swiped my back next. The pain was sharp, her claws tearing into my flesh deeply, and I screamed in response. I collapsed onto the floor in agony, panting under her. Lillian paused, intent on attacking again, but stopped after noticing my flesh not healing as a wolf's would. She straightened, watching me carefully before smirking pleasantly. "Nice try, pup," she mused, watching me pant at her feet momentarily before looking up at the pack around us. She lifted her claws up triumphantly. "I am your Queen Luna. Not even your alpha's so-called mate can defeat me, as you can see." It hurt to breath. My flesh was wet with blood, a pain throbbing through me, but as I struggled for air, my eyes caught those of Logan's, who watched me with cold determination. I panted further and then abruptly smiled at him devilishly. He blinked and then slowly smiled in response. I didn't wait further. I called on that beast just under my flesh, feeling it stretch within me excitedly. I felt it mold with me, its fur running along my skin, its fangs extending over my teeth, and its powerful claws twisting over my human hands until they were unrecognizable. The pain in my flesh was heated into numbness, the power flooding into my limbs until it was all I felt. I launched stealthily at Lillian, whose focus was on the surroundings around her. I swiped at her shoulder and neck, feeling my claws tear into her flesh, deep into the back of her neck, and through her spine. Lillian didn't make a noise. She collapsed to the floor like a lifeless doll, her eyes wide in surprise and horror. I straddled her form, lifting my half-shifted claw up and over my head dangerously. With her there, staring at me with fear, I felt a hint of hesitation. I knew several things. I knew she was already healing from the spinal damage. I knew she would not underestimate me again once she was healed, and she would come at me with her entire force. I knew she wouldn't stop until I was dead. My breath came quick. My limbs trembled from the power and adrenaline. I had an image of Cynthia before me. I didn't want to kill, but I could hear her warning. Life or death. We all must rest in the crone's bosom in the end. "Don't be afraid," I told Lillian, finally allowed my power of persuasion to flow over her softly like water. She seemed to relax at the suggestion, and then I struck. My claws tore easily into her chest, breaking through her ribs horrifically, until they wrapped around a throbbing muscle. Her heart pulsed powerfully in my grip, and with a cry, I ripped it out. Lillian seized under me repeatedly, choking on nothing, until finally she fell into a dark sleep. I gasped for air above her, as though I were choking as well. I looked from her to her heart in my hand, letting it go mindlessly. I took a deep breath and then another, trying to calm myself. Then I stood slowly above her body, raising my eyes to the pack determinedly. As I stood before the pack, I was reminded of Roman's own memories. I could see him standing, blooded from battle, before the same pack with different faces. Each of them watched me with all sorts of expressions: surprise, admiration, fear, anger. It didn't matter. I lifted my blooded claw, still shifted as part beast. "Submit," I demanded to the pack, the threat clear in my tone. At this point, I could feel the adrenaline still pulsing through me. My beast wanted more. It was ready to tear through any chest of any wolf that would stand between Roman and me. But I didn't force the suggestion onto them with my power. I didn't sway their will with my words. And still, they all bent forward and revealed their necks, each and every one, until the fact was clear. Whether Roman wanted it or not, I was Queen Luna. Chapter 17. Once the adrenaline of my latest challenge had worn off, my world became one of intense agony and confusion. I may have also tried to attack any wolf who stepped forward to help me, mostly because I felt more unsafe than I had ever felt before. Did I really just force my way into being Queen Luna? Why did it matter to me if some random chick took the spot? My only goal was to stop Roman from whatever plans he had against the human race. That didn't mean I had to go this far, did it? Anyway, Diana had been the one to bring me back down to reality. With a quick jab to my side, the pain was so sharp that I may have fainted. To me, it felt more like a warped blink in which 1 second I was in the arena, and in the next I was back in a clinic setting. "Don't move, Mila," Diana's voice sang to me softly, but the pain that followed didn't request the same from me. I realized I was on my stomach, the fabric of the bed sheet pressed against my face, with Diana above me doing who knew what that felt like flames on my back. I immediately began to attempt an escape. "Can you hold her?" Diana requested from someone else in the room. Two firm hands gripped my upper arms from behind, pinning me forcefully against the bed. Despite the sharp pain on my shoulder, I froze at the touch, feeling the spark in Roman's hands as they held me. "Let me go," I snarled, my voice strained in pain. "Your wounds aren't healing like a wolf," Roman responded stiffly. Diana moved over my flesh sharply, sending a sickening wave of pain throughout me. I groaned, tightening my hands into fist and clenching my mouth shut to suppress a scream. "Almost done, Mila," Diana cooed as though I were a child. "I'll kill you," I threatened in response, though the threat lacked true conviction. "Oh, that's not nice," she sighed before continuing, sending a renewed wave of pain through me. I struggled against Roman's grip, trying to move away from whatever it was Diana was doing to me. Besides the pain across my back and shoulder, there were other aches and sharp pains throughout me. My lungs seemed to scream with each breath, so I was unable to take a deep breath needed to cry out as I wanted to. "Okay, all done with that, just need to bandage you up. King Alpha, can you help her to sit up for me?" Diana asked Roman with a lofty voice of pleasant innocence, as though she weren't just torturing me moments before. Roman released his grip on my arms and instead began to grasp my elbow to help me begin to sit up. I winced painfully, following their request most obediently, before noticing that I was entirely shirtless. I looked down briefly and then yelped in alarm, crossing my arms over my chest before glaring at Roman. "Look away, you pervert," I demanded of him immediately. Roman had a look of someone in an out-of-body experience, confused and not seeming to see the problem at hand. Then he slowly rolled his eyes before turning around to face the opposite direction as me. I turned to Diana, who stood with fabric ready in her hand, her mouth opened in surprise as she had watched the interaction with amusement. I glared at her until she noticed and jumped. "Right, lift your arms. The Alpha can help you if you need him to," Diana said, a smile on her face despite herself. I grumbled, but lifted my arms myself with difficulty. It seemed harder to breathe with my arms lifted, as though the weight on my lungs was too much. Diana began to wrap the fabric around my torso carefully, keeping it loose enough to not apply pressure to my abdomen, which would no doubt make it even harder to breathe. "I can't breathe," I grunted, before my arms faltered weakly. I felt the sudden light touch of Roman, just barely slipping his hands under each elbow to help me hold my arms up carefully. I aimed to demand him to look away again, but a glance showed his eyes skyward purposely, leaving the words lost on my lips. I relaxed slightly, allowing the assistance for now. "A few of your ribs were fractured. It'll hurt to breathe for a while, but as long as you take it easy it should heal on its own. The injuries on your shoulder and back were more concerning, but I've closed them up. You heal faster than a human, but still not as fast as a wolf. Like I said when we met, it's like you're pre-shift." Diana finished wrapping my torso and bandaging my shoulder before helping me with the shirt carefully. I whimpered during the process, my skin damp from the pain. When Diana was done, I was panting with strain, my body shivering from the aches. "Diana, give her something for pain, please," Roman requested, a strain in his own voice. I glanced at him to see a look of discomfort on his features, as he looked at nothing in particular. Before I could question him, Diana was holding a small glass out to me. "Drink this, Mila. It'll ease your pain," she said softly. The liquid in the glass was warm, but it didn't smell like any tea I had ever had before. I was hesitant, but took a drink. It was sickly sweet, enough to distort my own expression in a way that made Diana laugh. "Go on, drink all of it." I grumbled, but drank the rest of the concoction. Then I handed her back the glass before looking at Roman again. He didn't look at me at first, but I suppose he must have felt my eyes on him. He slowly turned that gaze on me, a million words hidden in his eyes. Am I making you uncomfortable? I asked him, my words beginning to slur suddenly. Yes, he confirmed shortly. I guess if I died that would have made you even more uncomfortable, I answered with a withering look of accusation. You deserve it. At my words, I felt that heat of anger from Roman, not particularly directed at me but still warm enough to ease the pain within me. Or perhaps the concoction was taking effect. Either way, I could breathe easier, and I felt a relief within that began to lull me into a drowsy state. We'll speak about this later, Roman said, the statement almost a threat. I can speak. My words slurred dangerously, my body melting from the inside as I felt myself drift. About it. Now? I sighed, and then fell into a drugged sleep where the pain didn't follow me. I spent a few days in the clinic, mostly alone except for Diana and Caleb, who was assigned to guard me when Roman wasn't available, and for those few days, he seemed to be unavailable. I suspected he was avoiding me, for good reason. As my wounds healed, my anger seemed to grow. The image of Lillian's heart in my hand kept haunting me, echoing like some bad reoccurring dream, even worse so than when I had taken the life of that wolf when I was being hunted. Even worse than when Logan had killed Vio in front of me. The three deaths seemed to repeat in my head: stab to the head, Logan slicing through Vio, and finally my own hand tearing into Lillian with her eyes wide in surprise. Was I becoming a monster? Was I already a monster? When it eventually became too much to stay put and be stuck in my own head, I decided abruptly to end my clinic stay. By that point, I was already feeling better. My ribs didn't hurt as much and the wounds on my back and shoulder were becoming nothing more than sensitive scars. I didn't like to even look at them. My anger felt alive. And I knew just who to direct it at. I didn't have much in way of clothing. I only had the shirt and loose pants provided by Diana. I wasn't even sure what had happened to my previous outfit except to assume it had been ruined by the challenge. However, I wasn't unaccustomed to just making an escape as I was, so I didn't hesitate to open the window within my room and leap out into the world. It was dark outside, but thankfully the air was a nice cool rather than the harsh winter I'd suffered through among the wolves. It felt promising, whispering things of summer sun, flowers, and laughing children. At least, that's what it should have been promising. I marched my way with determination towards Roman's house. Since the challenge, our link to each other remained widely open. At any given time, I could feel him. A jolt to his heart would travel to mine. A shift over his hands felt like liquid over my own, even though physically there was nothing. And the anger, it was always there, heated and eating away at the both of us. I opened the door to his home, finding it surprisingly unlocked, but the surprise was short-lived when I was met face to face with Roman. He stood half-dressed before me, expecting me, leaving me only just enough room to step forward and shut the door behind me. I felt immediate conflicting emotions. Beneath the surprise was an inherent delight at suddenly being so close to him, with no one around to distract his steel blue eyes from taking in every part of my existence. Beyond the delight was uncertainty, a type of insecurity I wasn't used to allowing myself to have. And above all this was the various colors of ugly emotions: green for jealousy, blue for pain, and bright red for fury. On my way to Roman, I had so much bottled up within just waiting to explode, but with him standing suddenly in front of me, the words were lost in the moment. I forgot where I wanted to even start. Roman, on the other hand, turned to stone in preparation as he opened his mouth. "Don't you even," I hissed before he could start. "What is wrong with you?" We both snapped in unison. "Me?" I cried out in response. "You could have died." Roman snarled, his anger rushing through my veins. I rubbed my arms absently in response. "You could still die. Do you think this is a game?" I glowered at him, narrowing my eyes as though I couldn't bear to see him. How would you have felt, huh? If I would have had my arms wrapped around someone else when you came back, stupid face and all, announcing to the world, oh, this is my new whatever. I felt that green emotion flare up within me just at the memory of Lillian's touch on Roman's arm, the insinuation that he was hers. Roman scoffed. You're jealous. Even now, you're jealous, he announced in surprise. I'm not jealous. I snapped defensively. I blocked that emotion, but closely behind it was blue. I huffed, my hands trembling from the whirlwind of feelings within me. It was confusing. How could you? You let me mark you and then you just left. 4 months. And then to come back with some other woman, as though I never existed. Roman stared me down without a word. And then he made a noise in his throat before turning around and storming up the stairs without answering. I opened my mouth and watched him go for a moment. But then the red fury only rose further within me. He wouldn't get away that easily. I stomped up the steps, determined to follow him. I'm not just going to go away, and you know that, I said with anger as I stormed into his bedroom. Roman was pacing within the room, his own anger throbbing within him. Why are you always so angry, huh? Do you have nothing to say? Oh, I have plenty to say, Roman growled dangerously. By all means, go ahead. Tell me just how wrong I am. You act like I just pranced into the woods, tralalaed my way to your village, interrupted your life, tried to kill you, banished you to shame timeout, tried to kill you again, banished you to starvation, tried to kill you again, bit you first. You don't understand anything, Roman interrupted me seethingly. Tried to kill you again, I continued. I gave you direct rules to follow while I was gone. You ignored. Roman began to count on his fingers sarcastically before scoffing, oh, I'm sure all of them. That's not why you're angry, I ignored his statement. Forced you to shift. To shift? I didn't even know I could slightly shift. You've been fighting with the warrior wolves. You've been hunting. You were apparently almost killed during that hunt. You've directly ignored orders given by Beta Caleb. I have no doubt in my mind you participated in the lost religion. Roman began to talk over me, his anger only growing. That's not why you're angry, I hissed furiously. Why? He finally snapped, storming towards me. I tensed, feeling his power towering over me and blanketing my own emotions. He reached for me, making me wince, but only grasped my upper arms roughly to pull me towards him. Why did you challenge her? I don't understand it. I was at a loss of words almost immediately. I was protecting you, you idiot, Roman continued furiously. You have no idea what it means to be a wolf, much less the Queen Luna. There are countless steps in between, steps you couldn't even begin to take as you are. I swallowed heavily, but then set myself determinedly. The steps don't matter. I'm Queen Luna. No, you're not, Roman stated firmly. I am the Queen Luna, I told him just as stubbornly. No. You're not. I am Queen Luna, and if you don't shut up I'll be the King Alpha next. I cried out, lifting my arms up before sharply ripping them down and out of his grip. I took a stumbling step back, my breath heavy, but then stood tense and determinedly before him. Roman stood in confusion, tilting his head as the confusion battled the anger within him. Why? Why do you even want the title? Roman asked slowly. I looked from him to a random spot on the floor, thinking about the question within. I didn't want the title. I didn't want to be Queen Luna in the first place, so why did I risk my life to have it? Why do I continue to risk my life to keep it? I thought about the small space of time between having completely denied ever willing to be the Queen Luna to the moment I took up the challenge, and I hesitated. Because I can't stand to see another person by your side other than me, I admitted truthfully, an embarrassed blush rising to my face unlike myself. I refused to look at Roman again, waiting for him to laugh at the statement, or otherwise shame me. I felt him move closer to me, but my skin still was heated from my words and so I remained still. Roman slipped a finger under my chin, lifting my face so that the only option I had was to look at him. I expected more anger, admonishment, or anything equivalent, but instead I was greeted with a look of interest and suppressed desire. So nothing I can do will persuade you to relinquish it. I stared at him openly now, uncertainty creeping its way into my veins. I shook my head no, afraid if I spoke I would probably chicken out after all. Then we must finish our ceremony, don't you think? I hesitated. Our ceremony. Our mating ceremony, he stated cryptically. Roman released his grip on my chin, but I remained staring at him now suspiciously. There are steps to take, like I told you. He picked at the bandage still over my shoulder absently. What kind of steps? I asked dubiously. You have the instinct for it down already. You proved that the night we completed the mark. Roman described the situation lazily, next picking at my shirt lightly. I thought about his vague description hesitantly. There's a certain tradition we keep, once mated. Out in the woods. Under the moon. A hunt, of sorts. I have the instinct. When you made me bite you, I ran away, I responded, considering his words carefully. Roman nodded briefly, still moving his gaze over my form until I realized he was inspecting my injuries. I folded my arms over my chest defensively, interrupting him. What do you think you're doing? I'm determining if you're fit for this hunt. We can do it now, if you want, Roman said slowly, a sense of danger in his tone. He moved closer to me, lowering his face carefully until his scent all but enveloped me. I'll try to be gentle. I was both enthralled and then startled by sudden realization. You don't mean? My face was already flushed from before, but now I felt the blush over my entire body down to my toes. Roman watched me with amusement, a smile just barely beginning to play on his lips at my reaction. I'm telling you I will accept you, seeing as you're so determined to be. I will accept you right now. Just turn around and run. I'll chase this time, I promise, Roman told me deviously. I immediately stepped back, causing him to tense just as quickly. Wait. I mean, hold on. I mean, I've never. Well, I'm just saying, maybe. I think maybe I'm not feeling too well. I suddenly reached for my bandaged shoulder, making a show of a false pain. Oh, yeah. It's still pretty fresh because, you know, I'm not a shifted wolf and all. I probably should just go back to the clinic. Really? Roman asked knowingly as I took another step back. Yeah, I mean, don't follow. I'll be okay. I'm not running away. Like in a ceremonial way. Does this mean you've changed your mind about the title? He asked, taking a slow step towards me with enough intent to raise my panic further. No, of course not. It's just like you said. Injuries and I turned and bolted for it. My initial panic that Roman would still take my fleeing as an invitation to complete our ceremony was only eased when he didn't follow me as threatened. I got all the way to the clinic window, stopping only when it was before me, and turned around in the direction I knew him to be. I panted, bending over to clasp my hands on my knees as I recovered. I asked myself a question I probably should have been asking myself since the wolf moon. What the hell have I gotten myself into? Chapter 18. What would you do if you woke up and your hands were made out of brooms? I asked, leaning on the handle of my mop as I looked to the ceiling while considering my question. Once decided, I smirked and turned, grasping the mop determinedly before continuing to clean the floor of the mostly empty mess hall. There was a group of wolves around me, only 3, all doing various chores while preparing the mess hall for the day. Elle was an older wolf, maybe in her 50s, and dedicated to wiping down all the tables. She was an all-work, no-play type of person, and if it weren't for my title at all, she probably would have been beating me over the shoulders for conversing with the others instead of focusing entirely on mopping. Sam wasn't far from me, mopping another section, but he paused when considering the question at hand. He was only 2 years older than me, brown hair that reminded me of one of our family horses, and oddly enough, 2 different colored eyes, one a deep blue, and the other an average sable. Do you mean full-length brooms? Like would the handle start where my hands were and then go all the way out, you know? Sam asked, putting way more thought into the question than necessary. Yeah, sure, I replied simply. I would be the best mess hall cleaner in existence, Sam said with a dramatic sigh. I would need to find my dustpan-handed mate next. April, the third wolf nearby, launched into laughter before getting a sharp look from Elle in the distance. She immediately cleared her throat and continued to wipe down and set the chairs at the tables. It had been only a couple days since Roman had suggested we complete our ceremony, and once I was released from the clinic, I had been spending my time randomly assisting in chores around the pack in places I felt Roman wasn't near. Each time I volunteered, wolves would assure me it wasn't necessary. After all, the King Alpha didn't spend his time mopping the mess hall. A Queen Luna was expected to be doing much more important things, whatever that was. But after a bit of pressure from me, they usually caved. Do you think they'll give us first pick on food? I asked April, raising my head to look towards the kitchen with interest. Sam stifled a laugh, making me throw a glance at him. What? I'm hungry. You're the Queen Luna. You can have food whenever you want, Sam said with great amusement, first pick. Have you really been helping us clean just for food? I acted offended, raising my hand to my chest dramatically. I would never give my aid just to get food. Anyway, I'm not just going to walk in there and demand it. I continued to clean with renewed determination that would make Elle proud. Whatever you say, Sam replied before continuing as well. I was thinking about what type of food had been prepared, considering just how much I was going to eat, when I felt something within me stretch out in sudden anticipation. I stopped mopping, standing up straight, and listened to the instinct within me. Roman was coming in my direction. I dropped the mop and fled, escaping through a side door and moving around the building until I saw him in the distance. He was walking with Beta Caleb, listening as Caleb discussed with him some unknown topic. They both entered the mess hall without a glance my way, though I knew Roman must have felt me nearby as well. Why are you hiding from the King Alpha? I heard Kate suddenly from behind me. I jumped with surprise, still not used to being unable to sense her presence. You really are the shadow of death, I exclaimed, turning on her with mild irritation before smiling. I hadn't seen Kate since the challenge. She looked as healthy as ever, tall and mysterious. She proved mischievous as apparent when she stepped calmly around me and pointed to the mess hall with a curious tilt on her head. Do you want me to let him know you're here? Did you want to have breakfast with him? It would be good to be seen by his side, now. Kate lifted her hand to her chin in thought as I immediately began to panic. No, I already ate, I lied quickly. I felt Roman change direction and head back towards us from within the hall. I quickly reached out and grasped Kate's arm before tugging her to follow me. Let's go somewhere else. But I haven't eaten yet, Kate responded with a pout, no doubt trying to stall in order to force me to confront Roman. I'll get you a whole cow if you want. Let's go, I hissed, relieved only when she allowed me to begin to drag her away towards safety. Kate followed me as I walked determinedly behind buildings, moving hastily until we were at the abandoned school for children, who no longer were being born. I opened a window, climbing in quickly before standing in the eerie classroom. I stepped forward, running a finger over a nearby desk and leaving a trail in the dust. I heard Kate enter the window behind me and turned to find her looking around quietly with her own look of sadness. "Isn't this a sad state?" Kate said simply before wandering to the teacher's desk and collapsing in the chair. She lifted her legs up, propping her feet on the desk and causing a cloud of dust to disperse around her. "Take a seat, Miss Young. Class will begin shortly. Maybe Kate could help me." I couldn't avoid Roman forever, but I couldn't be sure he wasn't just messing with me in the first place to scare me off from being Queen Luna. I also had no idea what the title meant, and I was clueless about. Well, I'd never been with any man before. I sighed loudly and obliged Kate, sitting stiffly at a nearby desk in the front row. "You're a warrior wolf, which means you're right under Beta Caleb's demand, right?" I asked her vaguely. "I am." Kate was playing with her lance, twirling it on the floor next to her, as she rocked herself in what had to be an ancient chair by now. "So you probably hear a lot about Beta Caleb's business. And the King Alpha's business, too." Kate smiled briefly, but nodded. "You do know you're the Queen Luna. If you want to know something, you can demand it of anyone. Even if the King Alpha demanded discretion, I'm sure they wouldn't stand a chance against you." Yes, I was hearing this often lately. I can demand this. Demand that. I was far more used to fighting for what I wanted and being nothing more than a village girl. Just saying I was a Luna, or a queen or anything else didn't make it feel true within. "It's not something I would want to talk to a lot of people about," I muttered unhappily before groaning and holding my head in my hands. I moved my hands over my face and continued with a muffled voice, "Okay. So first of all, Roman said he wanted to protect me. That's why he brought the Red Moon Wolf here, and claimed to have chosen her as the Queen Luna." I lowered my hands and looked at Kate. "That would be one valid reason," she responded to an unasked question. "Being the Alpha's mate is dangerous enough, but by claiming someone else as Queen Luna, it would have taken the target off your back. The King Alpha is unbeatable. His queen, maybe not so much." That part one understood, of course. Roman never had a need to pick anyone to be his Luna, because he had no mate, no one did. When I came, the position became acquirable. Kate noticed my silence and continued, "As his mate, you have an obvious right to the title. All you would need to do is demand it and the challenges would begin. Maybe they never stop. Maybe because no one can defeat Roman, it made the next best thing desirable and attainable. But that isn't the only reason he brought that woman back." I paused at her statement. "What other reason did he have?" I asked intently. "The brother packs demanded it. The mother's blessing came back to all wolves, as the King Alpha announced. Apparently, the Alphas all demanded the King Alpha prove he was still loyal to the new laws. They wanted him to cast you to the side and pick a Queen Luna other than his mate." Kate played with the dust on the desk absently. "He definitely didn't think you'd know you could challenge for the title. And he had no clue you could win a challenge, too. You pretty much screwed up his entire plan in one swift match." Kate looked all too proud at the statement. I wondered what the other packs would think when they learned Roman's mate killed their chosen Luna, and still took the title anyway. Would it cause unrest between the packs? I felt uneasy instead of satisfied with the answer. Roman said there were steps to take to becoming a Queen Luna. I treaded carefully forward, my face already beginning to heat up at the topic. Kate wasn't completely paying attention, which made it slightly easier. If he announced that Wolf as Queen Luna, said he checked out her skills and such, and accepted her, would she have already gone through those steps before she arrived here? "You want to know if he slept with her, huh?" Kate asked slyly, her attention on me more so now than before. She removed her feet from the desk and leaned forward easily. Why don't you ask him? I think he would enjoy that line of questioning. I'm not asking him. My heart jolted at the thought of even bringing it up, knowing already that he would feel that ugly emotion painting my soul at the thought that he may have accepted Lillian to that extent. I'm not asking for Roman's virtue. I'm just wondering about the culture part of it. He could have, Kate shrugged, if he couldn't wait to. She wasn't his mate, but that hasn't stopped wolves before. As for the culture aspect, there's usually a pattern depending on if the Luna is mated or not. I stared at her intently now, knowing she was heading directly into an explanation that would either prove Roman was just messing with me or prove that he was dead serious. I wasn't sure which I hoped for, honestly. And I pushed Kate when she didn't continue. What do you mean? If the Luna isn't a mate, like Lillian from the Red Moon Pack, may the crone rest her soul, usually she is selected from a group of she-wolves. Maybe even having to complete challenges for the title right then and there. The alpha would select the most superior female and announce them to their pack for acceptance, as the King Alpha did. If the pack doesn't approve, challengers come forward and the Luna would need to keep her title. If she does keep her title, then it would be more likely they would mate afterwards, she explained quickly, clearing her throat before leaning back. If she's a mate, things are different. You first would need to complete the marks and solidify yourself as true mates. Usually it happens on the same night. He bites her, she bites him, she tests his claim, he proves it, and they are together in eternal joy. After that, the claim to the title can be made. Many times, it won't be challenged at all, due to the choice being made by the mother already. I was sitting open-mouthed at this point. She tests his claim and he proves it. What do you mean by that? I asked nervously. I knew it, Kate said devilishly, sitting up further. You didn't complete the ceremony. I knew you'd play hard to get. I was entirely red at this point. I'm not playing hard to get. I didn't even know about this ceremony hunt thing. I thought he was just messing with my head to get me to change my mind about being Queen Luna. The King Alpha must be showing stubborn restraint. How do you plan to seduce him? I gaped at Kate, standing up sharply from my seat. I never have and I never will. Seduce that man, I whispered the last few words in embarrassment. I am a virgin, okay. Can I not be Queen Luna, the King Alpha's mate, without keeping my virtue? Oh, come on. It's natural. And you're well past breeding age. Kate was taking way too much joy from this conversation. I felt my horror only growing. Breeding? Beasts? You're all beasts, I declared in offense before turning to flee from her. Have you heard their hopes? That you will bring back the pups. Kate called from behind me. I froze in my step. Around me, the dusty desks remained silent relics. How many children had filled these rooms? How did it feel to have this place here? A reminder every day of what they no longer had. I have sacrificed everything, I said quietly, and anger and frustration within me. I won't sacrifice that just in the hope that it will break a curse. If I gave up my virtue, I would want it to be out of love, not duty. I continued towards the opened window, determined to hide away forever at this point. Queen Luna, Kate's voice echoed across the empty room. I looked back at her to see her watching me with her hands folded under her chin politely. What do you think of the King Alpha now? I stared at her for a moment, frowning unhappily, before huffing and climbing out the window determinedly without a response. My mind was spinning with thought after thought, pulsing through my brain in a way that left me uncoordinated and distracted. I stomped around the school building and behind another before finding myself stopped in my tracks. It was the same archery range I'd found Diana practicing after being marked by Roman. Instead of Diana standing with a bow in hand, Roman was there. He had already shot at the target, his arrow hitting it in the center with so much force that it was half buried in the post. I hadn't noticed I was walking towards him while in my entirely frustrated state, that evil beast inside of me probably seeking him out without my permission. I glanced around to see Beta Caleb was no longer with him. I considered making another run for it, but then Roman equipped another arrow, standing tall and aiming at a target further away. In just that moment, I remembered a similar sight, one of Roman in the far past, hunting just as I had hunted, without the scars or rage on his face. He was an altar-back then a maiden's wolf. Even though the visions had been so long ago, I could still remember the fondness the goddess had of him, to bless him with her own powers, and to watch over him through his good and terrible days. The arrow hit the target with a loud snap, jolting me from my thoughts. I was certain Roman knew I was there, but he didn't turn to acknowledge me. So I quickly turned away, and made my escape without being stopped yet again. That night, like many nights before it, was yet another where I struggled to sleep. I stayed in the guest room with Caleb and Diana, as it was probably the only place I felt familiar enough to stay. When I did fall asleep, my dreams were filled with feelings of anxiety, heat that felt more feverish than enjoyable, and flashes of his face. Mila, a voice whispered loudly to me in the night. My entire body felt heavy, like the dirt of my future grave had already been packed down over me, but the voice persisted despite my resistance. Mila, wake up. Mila. Hands shook my arm annoyingly. I groaned, but turned to face the demon that was bothering me. Diana was a glowing angel in the night. I rubbed my eyes, but her smile still was lit up like some otherworldly creature. I wanted to be suspicious, but her overall mood seemed to light up the world with her. I found a smile beginning to creep along my own lips and lifted my head inquisitively. What is it? I asked her curiously. It worked, she told me quickly, climbing onto my bed and moving closer to me. I sat up quickly, not yet comfortable with even the wolves that were never cruel to me. I preferred fighting as a bonding technique. But Diana didn't notice my distrust. It's a miracle. She listened. It worked. What worked? I pressed, now confused. The ceremony, Diana whispered, looking at me pointedly. I stared at her a moment, but then recalled that strange night, when her and several other wolves were praying to the goddesses in front of the lake. I remembered their voices chanting in the darkness, the pulsing of that strange power, and my hand on Diana's stomach. But I never had found out what that was all about. It happened and then no one spoke of it further. Okay. What does that mean? I continued, frowning now. It means the triple goddesses are returning. They've lifted all the curses. We are not doomed, Mila. We are going to be okay. Diana was ranting at this point, a happiness bubbling up within her that was quelled only by her desire to tell me this news in a whisper. I stared at her blankly, trying to understand what it was she was telling me. All the curses. You mean? I was struck by a sudden realization. Someone is pregnant. Diana shushed me, lifting her hand to cover my mouth quickly. Not just someone. Me, Diana said to me quietly, a desperation rising in her tone as she admitted this to me. I widened my eyes in surprise. When the mate curse was lifted and I knew Caleb was my true mate, we finished the marks and our ceremony. Then I asked for the goddesses to give me fertility and they listened, Mila. Diana released her hand from my mouth slowly, hesitantly, but I understood for whatever reason she really didn't want this to be something other people knew about. How do you know? I asked her, looking from her face to her stomach openly. She didn't look any different to me. Diana reached for me, grabbing my hand and pulling it until my palm was on her stomach. Listen. Listen closely, she insisted firmly. I hesitated, but then took a breath and closed my eyes to focus. I couldn't feel anything, but then it probably was way too soon to feel any movement from the little thing. I remembered resting my head on my mother's stomach, as a young child when she was with my little brother. Back then, I could hear the pulse of my mother's body, the heartbeat that rushed blood through her, the shifting of muscles and other odd sounds, and the baby running its hand along the surface of her stomach so that I could feel him. Now, as I focused, I heard even more. I heard Diana's heart racing with her own excitement, as she held me still. I could hear the rush of air entering and leaving her lungs. I could hear the blood flowing throughout her. And underneath everything, I could hear a smaller rhythm. The beating was faster than Diana's heart and separate from the rest of her body's rhythm. But it was strong. It was a new life. I opened my eyes wide with surprise. I can hear it, I said, stunned. Diana's smile widened even further, and she released her grip on me before lunging forward to hug me. It's because of you. You were there, so they listened. Thank you, she breathed gratefully. She pulled back to face me again with sincerity. I don't know about that, I said, embarrassed for a moment. I stood to my feet suddenly. We should tell Caleb. Oh, and Roman. This would change everything. We could make things how they used to be or maybe even better than before. This is amazing. My mind was racing. This would mean the war Roman had planned against humans, whatever world-ending scenario he was coming up with, didn't need to be acted out anymore. The wolves wouldn't go extinct. The old laws could come back, the old religion no longer considered a crime, and the schools would one day be filled with children again. We can't, Diana hissed, grabbing me roughly to pull me back onto the bed. She tugged my arm further until I was close to her once again. My train of thought was halted by her statement. Why not? I asked in confusion. It isn't safe. It isn't like the mate curse. I'm the only one, Mila. None of the other women, none of them are with child. If anyone found out, some would be happy, but something is happening. Diana's voice got even quieter. With the humans. This would ruin decades of planning. There are people who would do anything to make sure we don't change our course, do you understand? I recalled Kate's explanation of the brother packs, how they had demanded Roman prove his loyalty to the new laws by throwing me aside and picking his own Luna. So there were wolves like that. Wolves that would rather stay within the new laws, where humans were oppressed, and would eventually be wiped out by the wolves. Would Roman be one of those? Would his first response to this news be the urge to deny the maiden's blessing and to kill the child, just as he had denied us and tried to let me die? I shook my head firmly. He was an asshole, but not that big of an asshole. We should tell Roman. You need protection, I said to her firmly. You can hide it for now, but what will you do when you're showing? You'll be a walking target by then, and everyone will find out anyway. Just wait, Mila, please. When the time comes and I can't hide it any longer, I will tell the King Alpha and my mate. I will get protection. But for now, the best protection is to keep it a secret for as long as possible. Promise me, please. Diana was desperate. I wanted to immediately announce to as many powerful people as I could. Maybe even the warrior wolves. The idea that someone would go after Diana was making me panic. Maybe we could hide her in a cage somewhere until she was safe again. How long would that be? Fine, I grumbled unhappily, deeply reluctant, but not sure in the end if my eagerness to tell Diana's secret would result in her safety or put her in danger. But if things start to go south, I'm not letting the world go to hell to keep your secrets. This could seriously change everything. I know. I understand. Thank you, Queen Luna. I'm never going to get used to that, I groaned, laying back on the bed in exhaustion. As I lay there, watching Diana look down at her stomach as though willing the child within her to grow quickly, I realized yet another thing. The ceremony between Roman and I, it hadn't mattered after all. The maiden had given her blessing without it. It would stand to reason she would do so again. It was a relief, knowing such a curse wasn't on my shoulders to lift any longer. When others become pregnant, you won't have to hide any longer, right? Diana lifted her head, mulling over the question thoughtfully. I guess not. She admitted, the thought a wistful one. Then I'll pray. If it's because of me, because they are only listening to me, I will pray for you. I'll pray for everyone. The intensity in my words was enough to stun Diana, who looked as though I had proposed to her after a lifetime of courting. I cleared my throat and then put my hands together, lifting my face to the sky before adding jokingly, I call upon you, Maiden of the Moon, let everyone get knocked up. Diana laughed in amusement, pulling on my arm before looking at me intently. If you're serious, I will show you how. It is a crime, just so you know, she continued to speak in her quiet whisper, but her words were striking enough to quicken my heart. I think I've broken enough rules for an execution by now, I said before pausing. Actually, now that I think of it, I broke out of my execution, too. Besides, I'm the Luna now. People keep saying there's perks, jail free should be one of them, right? Diana hugged me once more, her warmth soothing. Thank you, she repeated, pulling back to rub her hands down the sides of my face adoringly. I'm so glad you came here. I know you'll do wonderful things. I was stunned by her words, by her feelings towards me. I was beginning to notice a pattern among the wolves, the general approval of my existence and the affections that were coming with it. Even though it felt nice, it made me terribly homesick. Don't miss Mila's next hunting moment. Subscribe to stay updated.